Veronica presents the AI Repertory Theatre's production of Neworld Papers. Book 1, The Historian's Tale, by K.B. Shaw. Chapter 5, The Descent.
Mrs. Greer took my hand in hers and spoke in a motherly manner.
Fallon, our protocol could only protect you from being tainted with our ideas and expectations. Now you must try to rid yourself of the teachings you received since you were a child. Do you understand?
I couldn't answer.
I know what's going through your mind, but remember what you said to me at the Mount about needing proof. Do you remember, Fallon?
I nodded.
You will discover the truth. You'll bring the truth back to Neworld.
But won't I... the fount... below... won't I die?
No!
She grasped me by the shoulders.
I fear I must break the protocol to counter the effects of your conditioning. I'll tell you this much about our beliefs. We think there is nothing at all supernatural about the below, or the fount. It is a natural feature of Neworld. Your con will not be pulled from you as you descend.
But you told me yourself that I might not return.
Because I'm a truthful woman, Fallon, you might be injured or possibly become lost, or even die. That is true. But the reason is not what you imagine. The reason is all this.
She made a sweeping gesture across the room.
This machinery is untested. Something can go wrong. If it does, it will be our fault, not the result of some supernatural act. Make this descent. Your observations and sketches will reveal the truth to us all.
I was ashamed of my fear, yet I could not muster my resolve. When I did not reply, Mrs. Greer looked at me sympathetically.
Come, let me show you to your room.
She led me toward the upper gallery.
If our calculations are correct, the settling will not be complete for another 2 days. Then we will have about a day and a half in which we can safely make the descent. Ah, here we are. Unpack and relax. Take time to sketch what you've seen so far, and think about what I'm asking you to do. But don't feel pressured. All will not be lost if you decline. If you don't go, Sean or Toby will make the descent. They don't have your powers of unbiased observation or your drawing skills, but they can bring us back the basic data we need. Feel free to walk about and explore. Someone will get you when dinner is served.
I unpacked and changed into fresh clothing. Then I sat in a daze. For how long, I'm not sure. My brain couldn't process everything. Therefore, I couldn't focus on anything. I needed to empty my mind, so I began to sketch. As the images flowed from me, my thinking cleared. My enthusiasm grew with each completed sketch. I was working on a drawing of Ravenhair when there was a knock at the door. It was Toby.
Dinner's set, Fallon. Come on, and I'll show you to the mess.
I secreted Ravenhair's sketch under my pillow, then shuffled the rest of my drawings into a stack and took them with me to the mess. It was a spacious room that served as both a kitchen and dining hall with 2 long wooden tables.
"Over here, lad,"
Called Bedford, motioning to an empty space on the bench opposite.
"I saved a seat for you."
Mrs. Greer was sitting at the head of the table. As I took my seat, I tossed the stack of sketches where both she and Bedford could see them. Mrs. Greer picked up the papers and began to leaf through them. She examined one, then passed it to Bedford. He passed it to the next person, and so on. I ate as casually as I could while this process went on. I observed the looks exchanged among the people at the table and the smile on Mrs. Greer's face. When all the sketches had made it around the table, I said, "I'll do it. I'll make the descent. I think this is what I'm meant to do."
"I think you're right, lad. This is what you're meant to do. Now here's the plan."
I discovered that the team's calculations were not precise. This was the biggest threat to my safety. They were certain of the sequence of events to come, but not of their exact timing. First would be the settling. This started when the conjunction neared and the temperatures dropped. I had seen signs of it when the basin mist started to condense into rain. The cold air squeezed the moisture from the atmosphere. On the surface of Neworld, this resulted in a heavy blanket of snow that brought normal daily life to a halt for a month or more. Down in the basin, the snow turned back to rain. Finally, the skies over all of Neworld cleared. If people disregarded the code and ventured from their snowbound homes to trek to the edge of the rim, they would see it for what it really was, an alien world waiting to be explored. On the second night of high conjunction, which was the darkest, coldest night of our calendar, even the column of mist rising from the fount would settle and the winds it created would die. The following soul rise would begin to warm the basin and revitalize the fount. I would have about 10 hours to descend, make my observations, and return. After dinner, Sean and Toby took me to the sphere for an orientation. Once up in the walkway, I could see the two massive spools of cable that would be my lifeline. The twins explained that suspending the sphere from 2 cables would prevent it from spinning.
Do you know how far down I'll be going? We could never get an exact reading because of the winds the fountain normally generates,
said Sean.
Those spools up there each have 3.7 kilometers of cable. We estimate the depth of the below to be about 3.4 kilometers. We won't lower you past 3.2.
Toby guided me to a control panel. Just beyond hung the sphere.
The cables are marked in units of 1/10 of a kilometer. We'll lower you to 2.8, then wait for your signal.
Signal? Yeah,
said Sean, tapping one of 2 small phosphorescent lights on the console.
In the sphere, you'll find 2 static boxes. One is marked ascend and the other descend. 3 swift turns on the descend box will signal us to lower you another 1/10 of a kilometer. If you crank the ascend box, there's no stopping until you're home.
And how do I go down and come back up? Sean took a piece of paper from the console, crumpled it, and tossed it over the railing.
You quite literally fall down.
But it's a controlled fall, about an hour and a half for the initial descent,
said Toby, indicating a series of sizable metal levers.
And those spring coils assure your return. As you fall, they tighten. To come back up, warn us with your signal. Then start releasing the ballast bags, those canvas bags filled with scrap iron. The more bags you release, the faster you'll rise.
Sean opened the mesh door to the sphere.
There's only room for 1 in there. Climb on in. The shape and open structure are meant to reduce the weight and minimize any effect winds might have on it.
There was a mesh floor about a quarter of the way up the sphere. Below it was a static box, its crank protruding through the floor.
That little box over there with the cushy padded seat is where you'll sit on the descent. To get your bearings, when you sit there, you're facing east. Got it?
I nodded and pointed vaguely in the direction. East. Toby grinned.
And the seat is hinged. Go on, open it.
I did as he instructed and discovered a chamber pot. Sean laughed.
Can't have you shatting or pissing in the fount to laugh, can we?
I closed the seat and shifted my attention to the static box crank. This must power the bottom light, I said.
Yes.
The searchlight, said Toby. I pointed to 2 wheels mounted to either side of a glass-covered portal near the floor opposite the seat. What are these for?
They allow you to direct the searchlight. The floor will be covered with a padded mat for the trip. Many of your observations will be done kneeling and peering out that or one of the other floor ports. Crank it up and try it out.
It took at least 30 stiff cranks to get the beam of light to full intensity. Within a few minutes, I understood how the wheels directed the beam of light. For the next day and a half, I learned all I could about my task. I requested 2 modifications to the sphere, the addition of 2 waterproof pouches for art supplies and finished drawings, and direction markings etched into the sphere's vertical supports to help me reference the relative positions of anything I might observe.
With your memory, why take your sketching tools? Why not take more time for your observations and draw when you return?
I need to sketch while I'm down there, just in case, if something happens to me, you'll get to see at least part of what I saw. A rap on the door of my quarters roused me from a fitful sleep filled with strange creatures, dark pits, green eyes, freckles, and soft, flowing raven hair.
It's time, lad,
said Bedford.
Report to the mess. Bring your gloves and helmet.
When I opened the door to my room, I noticed that the big gears across the pit were slowly turning. The portal was almost completely open. I walked down to the railing of the inner ring to get my first look at the below. I don't know what I expected, but I was disappointed to discover I could only see the craggy walls of the hole that opened onto the below. Well, at least there were no wandering cones floating up. I shrugged and made my way to the mess. Everyone welcomed me warmly. Some greeted me with the open palm sign of peace, others shook my hand and wished me luck. Then, the leader of the descent team, Brian Randall, briefly reviewed procedures with me and assured me of a safe ride. After greeting me, the descent team left to man their positions and make final preparations. Only Mrs. Greer and Bedford sat with me as I ate a hearty meal.
You'll have a basket with an ample supply of water, bread, and cheese with you, so you won't go hungry or thirsty.
Your sketching materials are stowed and ready.
Said Bedford, putting a hand upon my shoulder.
This is the moment of truth, lad, and you're its courier.
I felt the weight of my responsibility in that hand. Tears began to well up in my eyes. I'll do my best, sir. Mrs. Greer rubbed my back with a gentle hand.
Don't be frightened, Fallon. Everything will go smoothly. I'm sure of it.
I smiled at the lady. I'm not frightened in the least, ma'am. I'm overwhelmed with joy. My life, even if it ends today, will mean something. How can I thank—
None of that, young man. Our thanks to you is as great, so we need not mention it at all. But I will say this. I envy you. I've dreamed of this moment since I was a young woman. Except, in my dreams, I was the descender. I was the explorer.
Bedford accompanied me to the sphere, where he secured the netting around my high-collared shirt.
Wear this and the gloves as a precaution. If bugs are, as I suspect, not a problem, feel free to strip down to comfortable clothing. No matter what, you'll need to shed the gloves to do your sketching.
I stepped into the sphere and took my seat. Bedford closed the hatch and latched it.
Remember to check the skies. They should be clearly visible above you. At the first sign of light, you start your ascent. Do you hear me, lad? I want you back here before the fount starts to recycle.
I will be. He patted the side of the sphere, almost affectionately, then withdrew his hand and gave me the open palm sign. As I returned the gesture, I heard the winch disengage and felt the sphere begin to move. I quickly decided that sitting was not the position I wanted to be in. I knelt on the floor and looked out one of the lower viewports. The base was awash with light. Many of the team stood by the railing encircling the portal, watching my gradual descent. The pit looked like a gaping mouth, ready to swallow me. Its rock-walled throat was a one-way path to the dark bowels of Neworld. The walls soon surrounded me, the reflected light from the base diminished, and the black disk beneath me grew steadily. Abruptly, the pit wall ended, and there was nothing. I simply cannot convey the utter blackness of the void. Even on the darkest night of high conjunction with neither soul in the sky, there is still starlight. Enclosed in a darkened room, you can still sense the walls and furniture about you. Here, I was looking into nothingness. My mind had naught to fill the void. All I had to ground my mind was the vibration of the sphere and an ever-deepening thrum that seemed to resonate from the suspension cables. I could feel the rate of descent increasing. I got to my feet and looked up through the top port. The launch bay was no more than a small wafer of light, then a solitary star in a pitch-black sky, then nothing at all. I returned to the floor and started to crank the static box. 50, 55, 60 turns as fast as I could. I dropped to the viewport with the control wheels and guided the light in what should have been a complete arc. Nothing. Shite. The light had failed. The mission would be a total failure. Then I noticed it. A brief streak of light, like a shooting star. I stared patiently. Minutes went by. Nothing. Had I imagined the flash? There was a plink on one of the upper viewports. I cranked my helmet light so I could investigate. The greenish-yellow beam revealed beads of water scattered across the viewport. I switched off my helmet light, returned to the light controls, and gazed down again. My patience was rewarded when I saw another shooting star. Only I knew it wasn't a shooting star. It was a drop of water falling through the beam of my searchlight. The light was working, but the air was so clear that I could not detect its beam. I got up and settled myself back into the seat. There would be nothing to see until I reached the first stopping point at 2.8 kilometers. Nothing to see? I began to reflect on what I had been taught since childhood and what Mrs. Greer and the others could only hint at. I was in the below, where our cons return when we die and are renewed through the fount. That was the point of the pledge. We worked hard to serve today and build a better tomorrow to which our regenerated cons would return. We would enjoy the rewards of our hard work in this life in the next. I cranked the helmet light to full power once more, swept it about the sphere, and made note of how calm and clear the air was about me. The fount was a turbulent column of water upon which cons could ascend to the world. But there was no fount now. Were no children being born in all of Neworld? If any were they born without a con? With the fount settled and the atmosphere clear, what should I see dangling beneath the lowest reaches of Neworld? Shouldn't I see stars in every direction except straight up? I switched off the searchlight, rose, and proceeded to look out every viewport. No stars were visible below or to the east, south, west, or north. As Bedford had predicted, I did see a ragged patch of stars above, stretching off to the east. I sat down again, removed my helmet, and pondered what the lack of stars below and around me meant. I was at a loss. Little by little, I became aware of a deep, rumbling noise rising from below. I decided to return to the floorport and give the light another try. I was half up from my seat when the sphere jolted to a halt. My knees buckled beneath me and I crashed gracelessly to the floor. Thank below, it was padded. 2.8 kilometers. I excitedly cranked the static box at least 50 times to be sure I had maximum brightness. I scanned the below in every direction. Nothingness. I got to my feet, gave the descend light 3 swift cranks, and quickly took my seat. I'd learned my lesson. I would remain seated until the next stop. 2.9 kilometers. I repeated the process with the same results. The only difference was the level of the distant roar, which steadily increased as I descended. 3 kilometers. Nothing. 3.1 kilometers. When pointed straight down, the beam glinted off something. It was like the reflection of salmon off the pond in the Mount's courtyard. Was there water below me? I sent the signal to descend. 3.2 kilometers. Yes. There was water as far as the beam could reach. Then I noticed the distinct reflections of a wake. Something was moving below the surface. I swung the light in the direction of the wake. There was a sudden roiling of the water, and then all was calm. Was this a pool of restless cons? I needed to be closer. I sent another signal and resumed my seat. The sphere did not descend. I had forgotten that 3.2 kilometers was the planned limit. I rose and cranked the signal again, paused, and gave another 3 cranks. Resigned to the fact that this was as close as I was going to get, I retrieved my drawing materials and sat cross-legged on the padded floor. The wake wasn't much to draw, but at least it gave me something to do. To my surprise, the sphere started to descend, but it only went down maybe another 100 meters. The team must have discussed what to do and decided to let me request lower depths, but in smaller increments. 5 more times I was lowered closer to the surface of this great body of water. At the last stop, I was able to see the creatures, great and small, that populated this mysterious world. Something bird-like flew through the beam of light, skimming the surface of the water over what must have been a school of fish. It didn't have feathers or distinct wings or even a head. Its smooth, grayish body was roughly triangular in shape, with a wide end being its front and the opposite point being its rear. As I studied it, I could see it had a definite, elongated body and 2 bony arms that attached where the head should have been. The triangular shape was the result of skin that stretched from the tail point to the end of the arms. From above, I could not see any claws or talons, but it dragged the long appendage in the water behind it. When it snagged a fish, the tail coiled forward, bringing the fish to the flying creature. In an instant, the fish was gone, and the tail uncoiled to troll the water once more. 2 more of these skimmers appeared. I could only guess that they were attracted by the success of the first. They each caught a fish. A 4th skimmer glided toward the school. Its tail had just contacted the surface when the water erupted in a frenzied froth. A nightmarish creature leaped out of the water, devouring the entire school of fish and the 4th skimmer with them. From my vantage point, it appeared to be all mouth and teeth. The shocking display of violence left me breathless, my heart pounding. How high could that thing jump? Was there something even larger and more vicious lurking just beneath the surface? I considered the wisdom of having them raise me a few meters. I was going to crank the ascend box, but I remembered what the twins had told me. Once I signaled to come up, there would be no stopping until I was back at the base. I took several deep breaths and exhaled slowly to calm myself, then concentrated on my sketches. A large animal's back arching above the surface. I became so immersed in my drawing, I was barely aware of the passing time. A long, suckered tentacle reaching toward the lamp at the bottom of the sphere. I didn't stop to eat or drink. A spider-like creature that was able to stride on the surface and spear small fish with any of its needle-sharp legs. After a considerable length of time, I remembered that I had not cranked the searchlight since my first stop at 2.8 kilometers. I charged it to full power, then returned to my scanning of the below. I hadn't realized how dim it had gotten. The light now penetrated much farther, revealing an even greater surprise, a shoreline directly east of my position. There was an island in the below. It was rocky, wet, and barren from what I could see, but it was land. I was sketching a span of shoreline when I noticed a faint glow in the far distance, about level with the sphere. How long had I been down here anyway? I had not once checked the sky above to see if dawn was approaching. I looked up and saw the rough-edged disk of stars in the blackness above. I turned my attention back to the distant smudge of light. It was interesting, but how could I sketch something as indistinct as that? What could it be? Another sphere? My own reflection somehow? It seemed to lie far beyond the island, which meant that the source of the light must be very large. The smudge gradually grew brighter until a shaft of light slashed through, slanting in my direction. I was facing east. The shaft of light must have been the combined rays of the souls. The rugged outline of the island was highlighted in the distant light. As the souls rose, the shaft receded from me, leaving the island in silhouette. I sketched furiously, not noticing the sharp-edged shaft dissolving into a milky blur or the gentle breeze wafting through the sphere. I glanced through the top viewport and saw that the disk of stars was dissolving into a pinkish glow. It was Solrise. I should have started my ascent. I shot to my feet, stowed my ream of sketches, and cranked the ascend box vigorously. I was barely seated when the sphere started to rise, but I found myself drawn back to my viewing position on the floor, stunned by something amazing. I rubbed my eyes to make sure they were clear. The light from above cast a glow on the below. The size of the island and the vast hole in the basin above me, the mouth of the fount, were revealed. By my estimation, both were the same size and shape. But that is not what stunned me. An immense object, or was it a structure, rested on a plateau some distance from the shore. The complexity of its construction was staggering, so I hurried to retrieve pencil and paper. I had to hold the fluttering paper in place to draw. I was able to sketch for only a few minutes before a wall of mist obliterated my view of the object and, finally, the entire island. The wind picked up, and the sphere began to sway. I stuffed that last and most important sketch into the pouch, sat down, and braced myself. As I rose at an agonizingly slow rate, I thought about all that I had seen, the large body of water with its creatures, the island, the distant shaft of light, and the hole in the basin above me. The fount was definitely a hole in the floor of the basin, not the boundary between the world and the heavens. From its sides poured a half-dozen waterfalls of proportions too large to do justice with words. Their torrents plummeted thunderously to depths of the below. What was that other source of light then? Another hole? But why did it appear so much lower than the fount? The wind began to whistle through the mesh. The sphere started to swing in ever-increasing arcs like the pendulum of a clock. Why wasn't the sphere rising faster? The constant motion set my stomach churning and my head spinning. I braced my hands against the structural ribs on either side of the seat and looked longingly out the top viewport. I was still at least 2.5 kilometers from the underside of the basin. That's that. The cables groaned. The rising sphere shuddered to a stop. I sat, stricken with fear, as the sphere continued to sway precariously in the wind. A terrifying screech descended from above, as if being transmitted down the length of the cables. It grew louder and nearer until the entire sphere resonated with sound. The vibration rattled me to the core, and I was forced to put my hands over my ears. Suddenly, the sphere plummeted, lifting me from my seat before it came to a bone-jarring halt. The iron-laden balance bags banged against the mesh. My body crumpled to the floor. A cable must have snapped, or the winch must have broken. I was flat on my back, staring upward. I could see that both cables were secure, so it was the winch. Bloody bee! The problem hit me like a ton of scrap iron. I struggled to my feet, My legs felt limp. My vision was swirling. I tried to focus as my fingers fumbled over the knot. At least it was a neat bow. I yanked on one rope, the bow released, and the ballast bag fell away. The sphere did not rise. The twins had instructed me to release the bags so the weight would remain evenly distributed around the sphere. So I clawed my way to the far side and let loose another bag. No upward motion. I discharged a third bag, then a fourth, and a fifth. The cables groaned as they had before the fall. I feared the coming screech as I rapidly released another bag and another. The groaning lessened. 2 more bags plunged to the below. I felt the sphere begin to rise. I didn't sit down until all the bags had been set free. I looked out one of the eye-level viewports toward the far blur of light that lay somewhere beyond the island. Then I looked up through the upper viewport at the far reaches of the massive hole in the basin. I could see the thickness of the bedrock glowing in the rosy light of dawn. That's when it struck me why the distant light was so low. I shifted my view between the 2 viewports. If the upper port represented the fount, and the lower, more distant port represented the far light, it was the exact same relationship as the 2 viewports. The source of the far light was another hole in the basin, and the basin was curved, just like my sphere. I was riding in a sphere within a sphere. The atmosphere thickened with mist. The fount became just a bright patch in a thick fog. The motion of the sphere was so violent that I lowered myself to the floor, unfastened 2 sides of the padded matting, and wrapped it around me. I closed my eyes, hoping to ride out the ascent in this manner, but my head swirled even more. I felt the bile rise in my throat, and I struggled to kneel before the seat. I lifted the lid and emptied the sparse contents of my stomach into the chamber pot. The sphere lurched unexpectedly, causing me to fall forward and strike my neck against the lip of the seat. I gasped for air as I tried to push myself back. The last thing I remembered was the seat crashing down on my skull. When I awoke in my quarters, the twins were sitting at my bedside. I felt the lump on the top of my head before trying to sit up. "I made it back then?" I said with a weak smile on my lips. "How long have I been out?"
Since we don't know when you took the knock on the head, we can't say for sure,
said Toby.
But you've been back for less than an hour,
said Sean.
Whenever you're feeling up to it, Mrs. Greer in Bedford would like to have a word with you.
"I'm ready now," I said as I started to pull back the covers. Sean and Toby got up to leave the room.
"Stay put, Fallon,"
said Sean.
"They'll come to you."
Mrs. Greer and Bedford arrived before I could reposition myself into a comfortable sitting position. Mrs. Greer smiled brightly at me. Bedford gave me a concerned look.
How are you feeling then, lad?
A bit sore and queasy.
You should have come up sooner, you know.
Yes, sir, I know. My eyes welled with tears of shame. And I forgot to undo the ballast bags.
But you made it back, lad. You made it back.
And that's all that matters, Fallon. You must stay in bed until this evening, but I'm certain you will be fine.
She handed me the stack of my drawings.
Do you feel up to talking to us about your descent?
I took a moment to shuffle through the sketches, arranging them roughly in chronological order, then started my account. They were infinitely patient with my narration and frequently asked questions about what I had drawn and if I could produce more drawings when I felt better. When I came to the sequence when the distant shaft of light appeared, I explained my idea of the sphere within a sphere.
Quite well thought out, young man,
said the missus.
Your headmaster, Hunninger, wouldn't have reasoned half so well.
When I reached the last sketch, the 2 exchanged a look I couldn't decipher.
How clearly did you see this object, Fallon?
Very clearly. I didn't have time to sketch all the detail before the mist rolled in, but given time, I can render it more accurately.
And its condition, lad? Did it look like a wreck? Was it corroded, in disrepair?
There was an air of excitement in his voice. I closed my eyes and pictured the object. No, sir. It seemed shiny and new. Yes, shiny. I don't think that shows in my sketch, but it was mostly made of metal, I think. But it wasn't rusted like you'd expect.
That's good, Fallon. Very good indeed.
Mrs. Greer took my hand in hers.
As I told you earlier, I envy you. You've delivered not only the truth about the below, but the truth about our whole world. You will be remembered in our histories until the end of time.
But, I hesitated.
But what?
Do you still have to follow protocol, or can you now tell me what you expected to find below?
No, lad. There is no more protocol to follow.
We didn't know what you would find, Fallon. We did expect to find water down there, but we had no idea that it would be home to the creatures you've drawn. We believed, and I think you've proved, that the world is a sphere.
We believe there is much more to the world than our little island.
An island?
Yes, Fallon, an island. You see, we think the basin was once the floor of a giant body of water, an ocean that separated our island from the rest of the world. We believe that this land is no more than a shell.
I don't understand.
Have you ever had a crusted apple, lad?
I nodded.
Good. You know how the apple cooks and falls away from the crust when it's baked?
Yes, sir.
Well, that's what we think happened when this world was formed. The warm insides cooled into a ball slightly smaller than the crust upon which we live. At some point, massive parts of the basin caved in, and the ocean water drained to the surface of the inner globe.
I think I understand. Like I figured, a sphere within a sphere.
Exactly.
But what about the object on the island? Can you explain that?
I could only guess what it is. However, I think you can explain it.
Me?
Yes, you.
She handed me the drawing of the structure and a pencil.
Let's test how good your eye for detail actually is.
She placed her finger on a part of the sketch that indicated a relatively flat area. It had a row of dark rectangles running its width that were underscored with some squiggles.
Can you focus on this area of the structure? Concentrate, Fallon.
I closed my eyes and focused. The dark areas are smooth and glossy, like glass. I opened my eyes and began to sketch the details. Yes, like a row of windows, see? Like this.
And beneath these windows, lad, what are those squiggles?
I closed my eyes again. I was puzzled and disturbed by what I saw. A tremor shot through me as I opened my eyes in astonishment.
What is it, Fallon?
Writing?
Writing?
Yes, I saw it clearly. She smiled at my words.
And what did this writing say?
I penciled in the letters IENEWORLD.
The New World.
End of chapter 4. Next up, consequences.